Welcome to Community Forum. This is John Galatino. I'm your host. This evening we're changing gears a little bit. We're going to be talking to an amazing young man who is a junior at Richfield High School. That's Chris Bedell, who's with me this evening. At this young age, he's written a couple of books. He's a contributor to the notes from the institution in the Richfield Press. He's published The Lives of Lawyers in 2009. In May 13th of this year, the Richfield Press wrote an article regarding this book and his career objectives. The News Times, he's been in the News Times. There was a feature story on him in October 31st of this past year rather. And he's a frequent contributor to Letters to the Editor in the News Times, which I've seen, and also the Richfield Press. So, and he's a Student of the Month in June of 2010 at Richfield High School. So, I welcome you to the show, Chris.
Thank you.
You know, now, Chris, you haven't. This might be a first tonight too. You haven't been on a TV show either, right?
Yeah, this is my first time. It's exciting.
So what got you into writing novels? What started you on that path?
Well, when I was young, I read a lot of books. Like I first started reading the Wizard of Oz series, and then moving on with Harry Potter, and then eventually I started reading John Grisham, and he's written a lot of legal thrillers, and I've read most of his books, and that interested me, and I thought he was a really good author and could craft a really good story.
So what specifically got you into the books that you wrote?
Oh, well, I thought I might as well get in the game, too. You have to take a chance sometimes in life, and if anyone else can do it, I can do it myself. Okay,
that's amazing, you know. How long did it take you from the beginning to the finish? Some people take 5 years to write a book, you know.
I first began writing the novel in January of 2009, my freshman year at high school. I was almost halfway done. And then I finished the novel 2 months later. Once I started writing, I wanted to keep my groove and keep up the pace and not lose momentum. So I finished it in March of 2009, so it took 2 months.
And this is with your other activities, school activities?
Yes.
You know, you still take gym, you still do all of the other classes.
Yes, it was difficult balancing it out, but this is a passion of mine, and I just made the time to pursue my writing.
So you really enjoy this, and there's research involved in this too, right?
Yes, a little bit. You have to look at the news and see what's going on if you want to use that for fodder for your novel, and you also have to research and think about your characters you're going to write about.
So this was a fiction on Lives of Lawyers, right?
Yes, it's a fiction novel. There's the legal element, hence the lawyer's part, but it's also, there's soap opera elements as well, because that's interesting to spin the drama and all the things that can happen, like backstabbing, lies, betrayal.
I see. Now, are you interested in becoming a lawyer later on, since you're writing about lawyers?
Not really, because there's a lot of time into becoming a lawyer, because first you have to go to college and then law school. I think it's more interesting writing about the courtroom drama.
Okay. Have you been to a courtroom?
No, I have not.
So you did this all on research and,
yes.
Observation of scenes on TV and cases on TV and things like that,
yes,
right?
Yes, I've watched a lot of legal shows. I've watched the legal show The Practice. I've watched all of the Law and Orders, and I've watched a more recent show entitled Damages, which is about litigation, which stars Glenn Close as a ruthless attorney, Patty Hughes, and that's an interesting show, and that also inspired me as well.
Wow. It's amazing. Is there anything that you don't like about the system? I know you recently spoke before the Kiwanis, so some of this is coming from that. Is there something that you don't like about the system that sort of motivated you in this direction? You know, that the lawyers are doing this and doing that? And
well, sometimes I think with law, like sometimes some cases have merit, like possibly at Kiwanis I spoke about Agent Orange and possibly tobacco litigation or the Exxon Valdez case, but on the other hand, there are frivolous lawsuits like the McDonald's the person that spilled their coffee, that was outrageous. I mean, that's a bad example of a case.
You can give some of the details, because the people who are watching tonight, they may not remember these things. Just give us a little highlight on the McDonald's case.
Oh, well,
it was a lady that went to McDonald's and ordered coffee.
Yes, and she put the coffee on her lap, and she ended up spilling it, but she shouldn't have opened it up on her lap. I mean, common sense would say that would be a dangerous thing to do.
And McDonald's had it was hot.
Yes.
They want to keep it hot rather than cool artificially.
I mean, yes. I mean, it's kind of common knowledge that coffee, it's going to be hot when you get it, and you should be careful.
Do you remember how much she got?
I think I remembered they ended up, it was a long courtroom ordeal, and they ended up settling out of court for less than $600,000.
But $600,000 is a heck of a return on a cup of coffee, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, that's a lot, considering how little a cup of coffee costs.
Right. And some of the other things, like the Exxon Valdez, that was a spill off of Alaska that caused a lot of fish to die, and a lot of wildlife was damaged.
Yes, it also hurt the fishing industry, but that was an example of a possible case where it had merit. I think that case is still dragging out in the courtroom as we speak.
That may have been settled, but still something like that has some merit. So that's got you interested. There's this.
Yes, because it's such a topical issue. I mean, it evokes opinions, whatever your opinion is.
Now you did a lot of research. Did you go through trade publishers, when you were trying to get your book published?
Yeah, I went through a lot of research. I first tried to get an agent, but that's difficult because for the most part they only have they stick to their current client list, but the kicker is you need an agent to get a publisher, but it seems like it's a vicious circle. It keeps going around and around. I mean, I don't expect to become an overnight success, but I'm just looking for a chance. It's the same old status quo. The rich get richer while the people who have an opportunity, who want opportunities, can't get it. It's outrageous. The divide is just increasing.
So you made an attempt to have your book published conventionally, and you ended up doing basically self-publishing.
Yes, because me and my dad, we formed our own company, Chestnut Hill Self-Publications, and that ended up being a good thing because even if you do secure a publisher, sometimes for less known authors, they only make up to a 10% royalty on the book, which is outrageous. I mean, you have to share the profit, obviously, but you put all that hard work and time into the novel. So my book's $15, so that means I would have only made $1.50. Yeah, we got Comcast rules about we can't get too much into the monies, but that's okay. Okay, so. It's like anything else. Even in acting, you might not be aware that if you want to get into acting, you need an agent. And if you've never had a professional piece, you don't get the agent. Yeah, I mean, so it's like you got to have published. In your case, it's a vicious cycle that keeps going around and around. I'm just asking for a chance to succeed. So you published the book. You've got your own publishing company, and you've done a book, and you printed a number of copies. I guess we can say that because we're not really anything that leads to the sale we can't discuss. But you can see how many copies did you publish? I printed 100 copies, first edition copies, so they would be rare in time since there's only 100 in circulation. Right. Well, there's been many a good book published that had small circulations, then they were reprinted down the road. Are you working on anything now, Chris? Yes. Right now I'm in the middle of my fourth book entitled The Downward Spiral of Haley Richardson. I don't know if you remember, but the Cheshire home invasion case, that tragedy has been in the news, and I use that as fodder for my novel. I explore the issue of the death penalty, and it's interesting to see different characters have different perspectives on the death penalty, and it challenges the dynamics of relationships and has ramifications. There's also another storyline I'm working on in the book. It starts off as superficial drama. One might shake it off it's not really important, but it just snowballs into something bigger, like a snowball rolling down the hill. Pretty soon the drama takes on a life of its own, and it ends up setting up consequences for the second half of the novel, which will be interesting to explore.
So you're working on 4 books. You got 1 published, and you got 3 others in the works.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
It must be like an assembly line.
Yes, I think it's a good. I want to know where the series is going. The second book is titled Lies, Scandals, and Murder. That takes up right after the first book, and the drama continues to grow and intensifies. And in that book, there's A Death of an Icon, which was based on Michael Jackson, and then it's interesting to explore a media circus over a custody battle. And I also use the Bernie Madoff scandal as fodder for the novel.
And are any particular things that might be a little bit different than the way it's been reported? Any quirks or anything you explore?
Well,
in particular?
I put my own individual twist on the plots, and for example, in the third book, as we all know, the BP oil spill. That dominated the news for a while, and I explored that in my third book, taking a oil company to court for negligence.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of stuff that's come out of that situation. There was a lot of howling about it, like, oh, the poor oil company, but in the end, they shortcutted it for a few things, and they're going to end up paying quite a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting to explore negligence and the consequences and what that entails.
Right. Okay, and then the other book, how's that tie in with the others? The fourth.
The fourth one. That's a continuation. As I said, I explored a takeoff of the Cheshire Home invasion case, and that.
Okay, that's the fourth.
Yes, and the drama continues to intensify, and it's just such a topical thing, and it questions relationships because people have their own ideologies, and it just no one's safe, and it throws everyone for a turn.
And we have to go through the process because that's the way we're a democracy and we're set up this way.
Yes.
But there's an awful lot of pain for the victims, even after you go through that. So
yes, because they have to relive the whole ordeal at trial, and sometimes their credibility might be questioned. They might blame the victim.
Okay. So let's see here. On average, how long are your books? How many chapters in each of the novels?
My first book, Lives of Lawyers, that was a 15-chapter novel. It was 138 pages. My second book, I'm still working on the formatting and editing, but that's a little bit longer. There's 20 chapters. There's around 180 pages. And
wow.
The third book, titled A Killer Among Us, is 16 chapters, which it possibly could be more. It's like 160 pages, and I'm halfway done through my fourth book, and right now it's a little under 160 pages and around 12 chapters, and it could easily be around 250 pages by the time I'm done with the book. So the novels are building up as each one
well, yeah, I can tell by the size of the books. We've already given some synopsises, but which one do you like the most, or do you like them all equally, or?
At first I thought the second book, because there were a lot of twists and turns. For example, with the takeoff of the Bernie Madoff scandal, that involves the main character, Denise. She's the senior partner at the law firm, and in the second book I introduced her daughter, Holly, and she ends up getting caught up in the takeoff of the Bernie Madoff scandal. But now writing the fourth book, I think that's my favorite one, because I'm just, like I mentioned, that storyline where the drama keeps snowballing out of proportion. I mean, I didn't expect to have such a dramatic storyline from that, but the fourth book is definitely my favorite storyline. The drama is just intensified.
Right. Well, everything having to do with that trial, it's, because you're basing it on that. Geez, I can't believe, well, I'm sure there's people out there saying, don't you miss the normal things that people do, or this is normal for you?
Yeah, I mean,
this
who wants to write about everyday life? I mean, you want to look for the drama in the situation and bring that out through the characters. I mean, ordinary isn't as interesting.
Now, we have something here about your writing styles. You want to talk about?
Yes, my main writing style is I use dialogue, because I know you shouldn't use all dialogue, but I've read a lot of books, and books that haven't utilized dialogue, they kind of drag on and it's difficult to follow. But looking back, I should have probably utilized imagery more, and that's something I look forward to doing in later books. And another writing style I use is cliffhangers, because that might seem cliche, but cliches work for a reason. You want to leave the reader wanting more. You want it to be a real page-turner, especially if it's a legal thriller. You want them to keep reading and reading until they're done with the book and it's OMG moment.
Yeah, that's exactly what you want, because otherwise they drop the book and
yes,
yeah, many times they never finish.
Hunger for more.
Yeah, so they're hungry. Now the issues, we talked a little bit about the issues, but if you have something else you wanted to explore.
I have some more things. As I mentioned, I explore the issue of litigation, but another issue I explore in my novel is relationships, because every character is involved in a relationship, and the thing is there end up being surprising relationships down the line in the series. I mean, someone you might shrug off and not think much of might end up becoming a person you care about someday. And another issue I explore is addiction. The main character, Haley, her best friend, Miley, is a celebrity and her career's taken off, but she's also struggling with her sobriety, so that's an issue, and it brings its own drama. And Haley and Miley have been estranged, and through a current conflict, it brings about new issues, and it's complicated because at the same time they have this history, but also you can't just ignore something when someone's in the wrong. So it's interesting to explore the drama of being frenemies.
That's true. Now what is the main theme of the...
The main theme of the novel is that the people you know the most are the most capable of betraying you. For example, without giving too much away, like I said, with the first book, Haley and Miley, they have a complicated friendship, and Miley is someone Haley knows. They've been estranged, but they've known each other since the teenage years, and Miley has done something to Haley, and that's led to their estrangement, so that's betrayal, and then she ends up possibly betraying Haley again, so it's just complicated. There's just so much to the storyline.
Now, many authors, when they're writing a book, they put a little bit of themselves into it. Do you see yourself doing that from time to time?
In a minor extent. I mean, sometimes I might put myself in a character, but not in a major extent. I mean, as human beings, we all have moments of vulnerability, or highs or lows, happiness, sorrows. So yes, those are all attributes that make us human, and that is present in the characters, but that's more not a major extent.
Okay. Have you written anything else before you got to this? Let's put it this way. Before you got to these books, was there anything that was like warm-up?
Well, I wrote another book in a similar genre. I used the main character, Denise, but that storyline... That was a short series. I wrote 2 books, and I possibly might revisit that in the future. But that was more warm up. I wanted practice.
That's what I'm talking about.
Writing a story.
So you had some warm ups before you got onto these books.
Yes.
So how many books do you plan to write in this series of books then?
So right now I'm up to the 4th one. I hope to write at least 3 more, but so it would be 7 total books. But as I'm going through the series, I realized I want to tell more stories. I've just began the journey, and even when this series ends, in the 4th book, I've introduced 5 new young associates: Bo, Teddy, Lindsay, Sebastian, and I did that because I wanted to add fresh faces to the storyline, because the characters are getting older, and at some point I hope to have a spin-off series involving those characters, but I would still bring back old characters and blend the new with the old, and you never know when a familiar face would be popping back into the story. So the stories are going to continue for years to come, I hope.
So this is not like Nancy Drew or the Hardy Boys, where you've got the same people over several books. You've got a number of people.
I mean, you want to stick with your core characters that people have come to know and love, but at the same time, you want to mix it up and have some new drama and some new faces. But I think it's a good idea to blend the familiar with the new.
Are there any new projects that you're working on? aside from these books?
Not really, but at some point in time, I also hope to write television shows, and I have this one idea. I've been working for a teenage drama show. I mean, there are a lot of teenage drama shows like 90210 or One Tree Hill or the old 90210, Beverly Hills 90210. So I hope to write a teenage drama show someday and have that on the air. It would be amazing to write television shows.
You might do that by the time you're a junior in college, right?
Maybe. Anything's possible.
Well, I'll tell you, this is amazing. You know, the things you're doing here. As a junior, I got to look a second time. You're a junior in high school.
Yes.
Let's see. Press coverage. I've read a little bit about what you've been doing. How did you get involved with the Richfield Press? You know,
I first started writing in, we all remember the topical 2008 election. I first started writing in about that, and I ended up building a slow professional relationship with the Richfield Press. And at the end of my freshman year, beginning of my sophomore year at high school, I applied to be a columnist for the Notes from the institution, and I ended up becoming a contributing columnist, and it's just been an amazing opportunity. I'm in the middle of my second year, and last year, as my first year, I explored many issues. I just didn't talk about one thing. For example, I talked about the environment. I discussed standardizing testing. I raised awareness about genocide in places like Darfur, which might be forgotten, and I've also discussed pursuing your dreams, like I'm doing right now. I mean, I've discussed
you're going to be a motivational speaker at some point.
Possibly.
Yeah, I see. Well, it's a big world, and there's a lot of things, and you got a number of years.
Yes.
Yeah, a number of years to get all those things done. Now, what else do you do?
As I said, I'm a contributing columnist to the Notes from the institution. I'm in the middle of my second year, but also at the high school.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yes. At the high school, I belong to this group, Writers Circle, which is like around 20 or 30 of us. It depends on each week. We review someone's piece and we give feedback, and it's interesting. It's not the same old piece. We all bring a variety of writings to the table, so to speak. I mean, each piece is entirely different, and it's interesting seeing how other people write and their writing styles, and how other people are talented as well.
Now, what do you hope to accomplish during your career? Are you aiming to do so many books a year for years and years?
Possibly.
Yeah.
I want to obviously continue my career as writing books, but I also hope to become a columnist like Frank Rich or Maureen Dowd, because I think that's interesting to write about the world around you, because that's so topical and there's so many things to discuss. And like I said, I also want to write television shows someday as well.
So you want to travel, too, to get more information.
Yes.
For your books.
Yes.
And
develop life experiences.
And your columns, yeah. Let's see here. The goals you're currently working on with your book, I think we covered that a little bit, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and let's see here. Do you have a website that could explain
Yes.
a little bit about yourself more?
Yes, my website is livesoflawyers.wordpress.com. There's an order form where people can order out.
We can't get into that too much. That's why I just wanted to give the website.
All the information that's necessary is there.
Okay, and let's see here, and this and if because of the rules, I really can't get into too much about. Is there some other things you'd like to mention at this point in time?
I would like to discuss a general, non-spoiler synopsis of my first book.
Okay.
The first book, Lives of Lawyers, Haley Richardson's the main character. I narrate it through her eyes. It's a little bit of omniscient narration, too. She first begins, she has a meeting with a potential client, Taylor. Her child has autism, but has been through the ringer with vaccines. That seems to be a topical issue, so I wanted to explore the issue and give it a platform. But ultimately, that case begins to be tossed out of court because there isn't really a foundation for it. But it's still interesting to bring out people's opinions, and they end up. Denise, she's the senior partner at the firm, she ends up finding a case involving salmonella contamination with the food company, and that's an interesting case because there's a lot of courtroom drama. You never know what's going to happen, And Haley, she's dating Neil, who's also a lawyer at the firm, and her best friend is Sienna, who's primarily dating Doug, but she has her own issues to work on. She's a childish person, and she's immature, and that puts a strain on her friendships, relationships. But she also meets Julian, who could be a potential love interest, and I possibly work a love triangle, and you never know where that's going to go.
Now, do you do a lot of research, not to interrupt you, but I'm curious about this. Do you do a lot of research on the internet?
A little bit.
You go, and then you watch TV programs?
Yes, and I also watch the news because that's interesting. There's so many things. I mean, we live in the 21st century. News is constantly breaking, and you can use that for inspiration.
And do you watch some soap operas to get styles?
Yes, I watch a lot of nighttime soap operas.
I was figuring there had to be some soap opera watching.
I watch Grey's Anatomy. I'm a big fan of that. I watch 90210, and I also watch Desperate Housewives. That's a classic soap opera, and I've also started watching the old 90210, Beverly Hills 90210. Gossip Girl, that's an interesting one. That's a new one. That's a teenage drama show, and that's interesting. That takes place in New York City, and there's so much drama, and that also inspires me, all this drama from the variety of shows. And when I watch television, I sort of annotate it in my mind. I see what works, what doesn't work, where they might have dropped the ball with the storyline, or how, if I were in that situation, I could improve
And then you pick the styles up and put them into your writing.
Yes, I incorporate it. I see what works and what doesn't work.
Okay, so that's very interesting. We got about 2 minutes left. Is there something else you'd like to?
I'd like to continue with my discussion of the first book. So as I was saying, Sienna, she's primarily seeing Doug, but she also meets Julian in a love who also works at the firm, and a love triangle possibly develops there. And then Kirsten, she is another lawyer at the firm, and she ends up getting involved with a politician, and they meet at this big society event. It's an inaugural. For the governor's inaugural ball. He's just been elected governor, and that's interesting. And also, Chris is a minor character. He's best friends with Julian and Kirsten, and something could potentially happen between Chris and Kirsten, and Chris's role in the novel evolves over time, and he might seem insignificant, but I assure potential readers down the line he's going to have an important presence and should not be shrugged off. He is going to be a centerfold to some of the drama to come.
Now, this took how long, this first novel that you did?
It took 2 months for me to write a rough draft, and then I had to do layouting, laying it out, and then I had to do editing with the novel, so it ended up taking a while, but actually going through and writing it, it only took 2 months. Once I had the momentum, I wanted to keep it going.
Interesting. Yes, folks. Junior high school. Yeah, it's amazing. And so you've got, and how many more do you have, thoughts do you have? You haven't got anything in writing, but have you thoughts of maybe a couple of more things along this line? They're waving goodbye to me, I guess.
Okay.
We ran out of time.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
You're welcome, and we'll see you next week, same time, same station, another Community Forum show. Good night for now, and see you then.
I thought it went pretty well. I might have